Anna Seewald, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about personal development in the context of parenting, where I explore how you can find more calm, connection, and joy in parenting through the process of self-discovery and inner growth with a trauma-informed lens. I'm a parent educator, and my mission is to help children by helping parents. The motto of this podcast is raising our children, growing ourselves. Today, how to help kids with emotional self-regulation. One of the most important life skills we can teach our children is the ability to regulate their emotions, the skill of self-regulation. How we nurture that skill is through a process called co-regulation. Self-regulation, it's not just one skill that we teach and we're done with it. It's actually a compilation of skills, a whole host of skills that over time develop through co-regulation. Today, I am speaking with one of my very favorite people on the internet who speaks, writes, and advocates for children and their families compassionately and passionately, a colleague, an author, and one of the very earliest guests of the podcast, Dr. Mona Delahooke. Mona Delahooke is a licensed clinical psychologist with more than 30 years of experience caring for children and their families. She's a senior faculty member of the Perfectum Foundation and a member of the American Psychological Association. Mona is the author of Beyond Behaviors, Using Brain Science and Compassion to Understand and Solve Children's Behavioral Challenges, and is a frequent speaker, trainer, and consultant to parents, organizations, schools, and public agencies. She has a brand new book called Brain Body Parenting: How to Stop Managing Behavior and Start Raising Joyful, Resilient Kids. It's a fantastic resource and I highly recommend it. You have most likely heard the term co-regulation, if not elsewhere, but definitely on the podcast. It's a term that people misunderstand sometimes. So today I wanted to ask Mona to explain what co-regulation is, why it's important, and how to do it. We had a lot of fun with this. We will also dispel some of the myths around co-regulation. I really hope you will find it helpful. And don't worry, co-regulation doesn't mean perfection. On the contrary, 70% of our interactions consist of mismatches, according to the remarkable work of Dr. Ed Tronick. By the way, we do reference his research in this episode. Dr. Tronick was a guest back in 2021, and you can listen to that episode. It's 267, The Power of Discord. I don't want you to feel pressured to get co-regulation, quote unquote, right. It's an ongoing, imperfect learning process. I shamelessly want to promote two of my own classes. One of them is called The Why of Challenging Behaviors and the How-To of Dealing with Them. And the second one is called How to Be a Calm Parent. I taught these classes live, and the recordings are available for sale on my website. These two classes go together and they complement one another. And if you want to get them both, I recommend starting with the behavior class. It's an eye-opening class in which you will learn the true reasons, the hidden factors, the underlying root causes for children's quote-unquote misbehavior, and you will learn tools how to deal with them, how to decrease and minimize temper tantrums, meltdowns. In other words, get your children to listen and cooperate. Who is it for, you may wonder? It's for any parent who has a toddler, preschooler, elementary school-aged kid, a tween, and a teenager. Basically, it's almost for everyone. There is another interesting thing. People who took the behavior class, they told me that this class appeals to men, to dads a lot. So if you have a partner who is not fully on board with conscious, mindful, authentic parenting, this would be a good class for them. You can learn more and get the classes at authenticparenting.com/services. Again, authenticparenting.com/services. If you have questions, feel free to get in touch with me. And now, please enjoy this lively conversation with Mona Delahook. Hi.
She's so good to see you.
So good to see you. How are you?
I can't believe you were one of the first podcasts I did all those years ago. It was in my office and the sound quality was bad.
Yes, and I honestly didn't know what I was doing because that was 2015.
But you were ahead of the game.
I think I was, right?
You were. No one knew what they were doing.
No one knew what they were doing. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew I loved audio. I loved this. Yeah. I had a vision. I had a mission. Oh. And it hasn't changed. It's only gotten better. I think I am getting better. I was in the preparation of the 300 episode, which was a few months ago. I went back and in my external hard drives, I have from the past, and I was trying to get the old interviews. They're not in the podcast feed.
Yeah.
And I stumbled upon yours. I listened to that. I'm like, wow, things were so different. And wow. Look at us, like you have two amazing, phenomenal books out there.
Oh, but crazy. Yeah.
But I knew who you were, at that time. I think I was connected to you on LinkedIn. I was in the parenting field.
Yes, we knew each other, right? And I think, was it before I did books?
Yes, it was way before you did the books. Yes.
Oh, you're right. Because 2017. Oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Yes, before you did the books, I followed your work ever since. I saw your progression. I had discovered you, I think, through the Kids in the House. Do you know?
Yes.
I don't know what it's called. A resource, I think.
It's a resource. Yeah. I don't remember her name, but Kids in the House. I was on that early on in 2010, I think. Wow.
And that's how I discovered you. I think the internet was small back then,
I know. That's so amazing. Oh my gosh.
Again, Mona, congratulations on this phenomenal book, Brain Body Parenting, which I love, of course. And your work has influenced me so much, even before the books. Your philosophy in general has influenced how I work with people. I have speaking engagements, and it's just amazing that you were able to put it into books and it's more accessible and they're doing fantastic. And you yourself are such a warm and compassionate individual, because sometimes I see on social media, you post something that is counter culture or counter this traditional approach, and there is some harsh comments or they want to say something, but your approach, your response is always so compassionate and graceful. And I'm always in awe of how you are, who you are, and that's who you are. You don't fake it or anything. So,
thank you. That's so kind of you.
So what I want to talk to you about today, instead of asking about the entire book, I want to narrow in on one aspect of the book, because people can buy the book. That's the main goal. They can read, they can give it to their childcare professionals, and let's spread this message, right? Let's revolutionize parenting education. This is so important. Co-regulation, I think, is a big thing. Us being regulated in the first place, we talk about this a lot on the podcast, how the parent can get more regulated so that we can co-regulate with our children. Because a lot of people, there's a lot of misunderstanding around co-regulation. So I want to ask you, what kind of misconceptions are out there about co-regulation? And then maybe you can describe what it is in terms of, not like define what it is, because there's different definition, but how you view it in your work.
Oh, I'm so glad that's what you wanted to talk about, because I think it is so important. And there's a lot of misunderstanding, but also it's a very popular buzzword right now, like co-regulation, resilience, all those kind of words. And I think there are a lot of different ideas about what it means. And I love to talk about kind of clarifying that. In fact, I don't know if you read, there was a review that was about my book, but other things about gentle parenting in the New Yorker magazine today.
I just shared it in my group, but I haven't had a chance to read it.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Luckily, she ends up positive about brain-body parenting, but this article is so interesting because it's really also about gentle parenting, positive parenting, I guess, what the author is taking away from this shift to gentle parenting. And I think that there was some idea in her head that gentle parenting is permissive or doesn't require boundaries, or it makes us kind of mushy parents. And I really feel like that is not co-regulation. So what is co-regulation? It's this beautiful process that we use to help humans feel safe. And an easy way of thinking about it, I think, is that when a caregiver, if thinking about it in parenting, when a caregiver shares their calmness with their child so that their child feels calm. And in a little more detail, it's about nervous systems connecting with each other. And we don't work solo as humans. We always work with social engagement with other humans. And of course, our babies need us 24/7 to help regulate their little bodies. But our toddlers need it. Our school-age children need it at times too, because this trajectory from co-regulation, where you have the caregiver helping your body's state, as I talk about in the book, but in your emotional state, but it's combined, feel calm, is what leads eventually to a self-regulated individual who can think about solutions in their head, who can move their bodies on their own to feel better. But it's built. And so what I'm trying to do in the book is to explain, contrary to public opinion, you can't teach children how to self-regulate. Like many preschoolers are taught breathing techniques and yoga and all that, which is great. There's nothing wrong with breathing. And I love yoga. I do yoga every week. But that's not how we build self-regulation in children. We do it through our being with them rather than teaching them. So it's a huge topic, but I'm really glad you brought it up because I think it's something we need to talk about.
It is. Even when I explain this concept to parents, after working several hours with them, they still say, my daughter did this, my little son did this, hit the sibling, threw the thing, whatever happened. I understand that I have to co-regulate with her, but how can I help her to express her frustration better? They're still focused on the child, and parents always miss the mark that it's through us, our being. And
Yeah.
And I want us to talk about that. It's not a set of techniques that we do. It's a state of being. It's how we show up, how our demeanor is, how our voice, tone of voice, the look on our face, all of that. It's not a set of techniques that we do, right? And it can be imperfect and it can look so different for every person. So can you talk about that? How parents are always looking for a technique. Give me a tool, give me a technique, or give me something to my kids so that they can deal with their frustration.
Yes. Oh, it's like the bullseye question. It's like the right thing we should be talking about. And first of all, I'll say that I totally understand parents. I'm a parent too. I want quick solutions. If there's a magic bullet, if there's something exactly I can say to my child. And I think this is an example of a lot of our parenting experts and parenting coaches have very high followings and large accounts on Instagram with like giving parents what to say. And so I think there's a hunger out there on what to say. And sometimes you can say something that is a script and it'll work out great with your child. But if you've tried a lot of scripts, you've probably also found that it doesn't work every time because every child is different. And most importantly, what's more important than what we say is how we are. And I was talking to Megan Leahy. She's a great parenting educator and therapist. And she was talking about like energy levels and vibrating at a certain energy level with a person that is so powerful, this power of being that we don't talk about, but that science shows us that this presence of being actually reaches our child's nervous system faster than our words. And so we could be saying something in a very agitated voice where our body is stiff, the tone of our voice is revealing that inside we're very anxious and agitated and in the fight or flight response. And that gets translated with our words. And I don't think we need to have parents feel like freaking out about this, like, oh no, it's not what I say, it's how I am, then I'm kind of screwed. We don't have to feel that way. We can just know that as parents, the research also shows that we don't have to get it right all the time. In fact, we don't. 70% of the time we get it wrong, but we can repair and we can be curious and we can calm our own bodies down. That was the chapter 3 on how co-regulation builds a person's ability to manage over time. So you're right. It's about our body's state. And the neuroscience lab of Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, I'm so interested in her work, and I translated it for brain body parenting, is that she says the best thing for another human is a nervous system. And the worst thing for another human is another nervous system. So, in other words, we matter. How we are matters. And that's why it's very important to be gentle on ourselves, have adequate sleep and self-care, and know that we're the most important tool in the toolbox. We count, we matter.
We are the most important tool. I know I interviewed Dr. Ed Tronick on the podcast. And
yes, he did the study of the 70%, right? Did he talk about that?
Yes, he did talk about that. And I didn't ask him about the still face experiment, but even from that 2-minute little video, you see when the mom is not attuned to the baby, how the baby becomes distressed, right? Yeah. And it doesn't mean we have to be connected and attuned 24/7. Mm-hmm. But when we do, the children sense that incongruency between our words, our expressions, and our emotions. If, like, often when I'm speaking in public about difficult behaviors, I would do an experiment. I would bring a couple of people from the audience, to the front, and I would say, "I love your scarf."
Oh, and
And the person would go, oh, like it's a compliment, but it's like in an angry tone. Or I would, you can say the same. You can say
that's
something.
Brilliant, by the way. It's such a good example, right?
Yes, like there's incongruency, my tone of voice, my words don't matter really, like how you show up with your gestures, with your facial expression, tone of voice. And the opposite is true too. Like I speak multiple languages and I'm very good with babies. And oftentimes I can say something in a foreign language, but it's the tone and my facial expression that gets the baby attuned and interact with me. I've tested this so many times. And I always joke, you can, like I say, you can look at the little baby and say, you're such a little jerk, you little asshole you are. And the baby will respond to you.
Yes.
Right? Or a child, because it's the tone of voice. It's how you show up.
Yes.
Right?
That you just described neuroception. that Dr. Porges talks about. It's the intonation of the voice. It's one of the most powerful things that reaches that vagal nerve, right? Is the intonation of voice. It's an indicator of safety. It's a cue of safety. I've seen so many babies and toddlers and in my offices, and the parents will say, well, English isn't our first language, or they speak a different language. I'm like, no worries. And like you said, all you have to do is like, hello, my little sweetie. And then they feel safe.
They feel safe. It's the safety that we convey through our words. But when a parent does not have that sense of internal safety, right? That self-regulation, it is so hard. It could be a result of the current day stressors, right? Parenting is hard. It's emotional. It's taxing. Yeah. We're maxed out. Yeah. We don't sleep. We don't eat well. And we're, all of the factors that affect us. But we get triggered from the past. And our parents, let's face it, didn't co-regulate with us. I was talking to someone before I got on the call with you. I said, I'm interviewing this woman, about co-regulation. And my friend says, what is co-regulation? And so I explain, and she asks me, what kind of a child were you, Anna? I said, duh, the same like everybody else. My parents didn't co-regulate, or I was an intense, impulsive kid. But I worked very hard as a parent to learn to regulate myself so that I can show up. I think that's the hardest skill that I have worked in my life to cultivate as an adult.
I'm with you, the hardest skill. And I have to hold myself in the greatest self-compassion because I actually did not have an integrated sense of my body and my mind until my children were older. So now that they're adults, and actually one of my children is a therapist, we have had some powerful, painful, gorgeous conversations about what it was like to have me as a mom.
Wow.
And yeah. And, within the safety of a relationship, and since we're both in the mental health field, this was not a part of being a psychologist, this embodied experience. I knew everything about attachment theory. The body was never talked about in attachment theory. So I knew everything from the books. And I was a working mother of 3, co-parent, but still working mother of 3, busy bee. I loved being busy. I could multitask like no one's business. I loved being so busy. But oftentimes when my children were little, and I write about this in the book, I was living outside of my body. I was inside. I was very stressed out, even though I was doing all the right things. I was a nice parent. I was a gentle parent. But I was still a stressed parent. And when I realized that shift with actually my, when my children were a little bit older, but with the families I've worked with over the last 20 years, it makes all the difference in the world. And that's why I wrote Brain Body Parenting, because I don't feel like my field does a good enough job of telling us we have a great way, tons of books to say what to say as a parent, like, how to help your child think positive thoughts and reframe things and develop new concepts, which is all great. But we don't have a book that really talks about embodiment of the nervous system. And that is a profound shift. I think it's hard for some people to understand, and it is going to get some pushback, but that's okay. Paradigm shifts are hard, and people need to just relax and have a lot of compassion and know your children know you love them. My mom had no idea about co-regulation, right? But I knew she loved me. And back then, as a parent, she would automatically, if I was upset, she'd automatically just say, "Oh, that's silly. You just got to think a positive thought, like just, oh, don't be worried. That barking dog, oh, it's nothing to worry about, instead of what I would do now, which would be paying attention and being curious and sharing that experience with the child. So
there was a story in your book about your grandma who was co-regulating with you, right? I remember you write about that.
Oh my gosh, I had an angel. And again, my parents are wonderful. I dedicated the book to my mom, and she's just an amazing person. But she was a working mom. She wasn't there a lot of the time, and she had no idea how to co-regulate. But I had this grandmother who came from the Netherlands, and she smelled like Dutch chocolate and lavender. I'll never forget. And when she came to visit us for 3 or 4 months at a time, all she did was play with us and sit with us. I was on her knee or by her side taking walks. If I was upset, she would gaze at me and in her broken English or Dutch language, make me feel safe. And in the book, I think the most poignant story about her, or one of them, was that we lived in the foothills. And one time when she was here, there was a raging fire, a brush fire in California. It can get very hot very fast. And we lived near the mountains. And so we weren't evacuated, but we were sitting in my bedroom, and she was sitting by me holding my hand. My heart was racing because I saw the fire move up the hill, and I was worried that it was going to come down. And she sat there narrating to me what was happening with the fire. And I felt safe. And so all night we watched it crawl up the hill. It moved away from us. And I experienced having a fear and then having another human talking to me, loving me, holding my hand, so to speak. And ever since then, I haven't been afraid of forest fires. It was, she lives in me.
This is so powerful. I have goosebumps from this story.
Thank you. Yeah, she lives inside. So those humans live inside of us. If you've been lucky enough to have one, yeah.
And so that's what we need to give to our kids, so that they can internalize that sense of safety, so that they can feel safe. And oftentimes, here is another misunderstanding or misapplication, I guess. When we co-regulate in that moment, the child is still going to have feelings, right? The fear, or they're going to still cry.
Yes.
But the presence of someone while you go through a painful experience is what's going to make a difference in the future. Our goal is not to co-regulate and stop the child's feelings in the moment. I think I would love for you to speak about that, because that people say, Anna, I co-regulate, but my child is still crying. Then what's the purpose of me doing this? Because it requires a lot of presence and attuning, and it's effortful, and you don't see change right away, right? The brain is developing. We're building the architecture now so that child will be a self-regulated adult one day. I mean, how many dysregulated, reactive people we know, adults who at the drop of a hat, they just lose their temper over something silly and minor. And why is that? Because no one was there to co-regulate with them when they were little, through their fears and negative experiences and such. So Please talk to me about that in the moment. What's happening when you are co-regulating? Or maybe better yet, I'm so like psyched about this.
I know. No, this is
I
a
don't
great
know.
question.
I don't know where to go. But okay, so if you want to say a few things, then I'll.
Yeah, go ahead and let me say a few things that you can follow up, because I love your line of reasoning. You're such a thoughtful parenting educator. You're like really getting to the guts of this because you've talked to so many parents. And again, I so understand a parent would say, it's not working, or what is it? Or what's the purpose? Because I can't see my child changing in real time. So I just so appreciate that. So let me just say, we can add another word. And you mentioned a word that is very, very powerful. Again, that there's lots of research backing by this idea of attunement. So what is attunement? It is really when you do vibrate at a certain level such that you are reaching another person in a way that it feels good, essentially, that it helps. Think of tuning an instrument, right? You're tuning it. It's vibrating in a way that's beautiful and right in sync with the musical notes. So attunement is really a process that involves something else, and that's called witnessing. When we witness our children's distress, that is a powerful piece of co-regulation. And again, my heart goes out to mommies and daddies because it is hard to witness our children suffering. But the purpose of co-regulation isn't to stop them from crying necessarily, or stop them from being sad, or to make it stop that they are jealous or worried, right? But to allow that process to flower as it does for human beings, such that the child can feel witnessed, can feel seen, as my friend and colleague Tina Payne Bryson says, to feel seen, to feel heard. When we do that, our children's emotional literacy starts to develop. And we also want to make sure that we give our children the idea that all emotions should have equal opportunity. In humans, we don't just experience positive emotions. That's not part of being human. Part of being human is that we can experience sadness and anger and jealousy, as well as joy and empathy and nurturing. All of those themes are important. And yet, again, with so much compassion, I can imagine myself being parented by my mom, or dad would have said, if I was experiencing the negative emotions, to try to change the subject or have me look on the bright side of things, because it was hard for them to witness a young person worrying about something they thought was insignificant, right? Like, I don't want you to go to work because I'll miss you. Or I don't want to say goodbye because I'm scared of this mean babysitter. I mean, yeah. So I think that's the piece of letting parents know that a quick fix might be because we're getting triggered. Our own memories that we can or can't remember as when we were children. Sometimes we get kind of tense when our children are experiencing something, and it could be a subconscious trigger, something we don't have recollection of, but an area that can help us grow as parents, can help us get to know ourselves better. Nothing brings you into contact with yourself like being a parent.
Yes. Oh my gosh, so true. So true.
And it's hard, right? It's hard work.
Because it's so hard. I think it is the hardest. It's such an emotional experience. And most of us, of course, have no training. And even if we get some kind of training, you still have to learn about yourself. And maybe that is the purpose of this human experience, to evolve, and evolve. I don't know, to look at our own things. If you don't become a parent, like it was hard for me motherhood was very difficult. I was lonely, isolated. I felt
Yes.
a lot of hardship. I was a motherless mother,
Oh,
and I didn't know what I was doing, even though I know child psychology and all of this good knowledge. And I knew I was never going to spank my daughter. I had all this knowledge and information, but
yeah.
emotionally, it was so hard. There were like a couple of examples. I'm writing a book about this regulation of the parent as the main
Oh,
thing. And
beautiful.
it like,
Yeah.
I can think of a few examples that I said, holy cow, like this is so hard. And I didn't have any more children, right? So I decided to have just one because I knew my limitations, my personal sensitivities, my trauma history,
Yes.
and the no support available to me in the present moment. So I
Yes.
don't want to go through this again because I won't be able to attune and co-regulate. It's too much for me. And
Yes.
so, but
Oh,
I don't know where I was going with this, but it's a fascinating thing that how we co-regulate with another. When we do, it feels great. I think many people know how to do it. I feel like I think it's part of us. Don't you think? We just have to fine tune it and maybe learn, build the skill of it. It's not like we're missing it and we will never get better at it.
I have to think it's built
It's built in, right?
into our biology,
Yeah.
right? Like people didn't just come on the earth over the last 100 years when psychology, I'm reading a book on the biology of motherhood, and it's so interesting. So think about it. In order for humankind to survive, we have instincts. And I think there is that instinct to co regulate. We want to soothe our baby when they cry. We don't like to see our children suffer. I think these are biological instincts. So I totally agree with you. I think that this co regulation has enabled human beings to survive, to populate, and to have children, because that is the goal. In order to continue humans is to have them continue and raise their young. So yeah, that's such a very I think great thought, that co-regulation, we don't have to really be taught. We can also rely on our instincts. And then there's a lot of noise out there. For example, I was talking to a friend of mine last night, and she was talking about how she loves to take naps with her little granddaughter, and they're cozy together. And when she comes over to spend the night, they sleep in the same bed, and it's like a party and everything. And some of her friends were thinking, well, doesn't the child have their own bedroom? And shouldn't she be more independent at age 5 and all this stuff? And it's really, there's a lot of judgment we have about what does it mean to nurture our young. And a lot of people, I think, are dissuaded from their instincts. Like if you have a pediatrician or a teacher, someone saying that you're too, do too much of a certain thing. But what if it's a part of your culture or your family values? I believe we can honor those, and we probably should honor those.
Yeah. I mean, we're mammals, right?
We're mammals.
I
Look at
remember,
puppies. Yeah.
I remember my daughter was, I think, 4 years old, and she would get up at night, right? At that time, they get up at night. Their imagination is very
Yes.
vivid and they have nightmares probably. She would get up. She was sleeping already in her bed, and I would lie down always with her and make sure she fell asleep. And then I would sneak out and go into my bedroom, and she would sleep through the night most of the time. But then she would wake up and tick, 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 run to my bedroom. And one day she said, "Mommy, why do you sleep with Daddy? He's big. He doesn't need protection. I am small." And I'm like, yes, so true.
That is so awesome. Out of the mouth of babes, right?
Yes,
oh my gosh.
There's nothing wrong, but it's the, yeah, but what is it with this culture that if you show care, warmth, nurture your children, you are spoiling them, cuddling them, or they need to be independent. There's the emphasis on being independent, like there is no tomorrow. And I mean, we can talk about that, why that is, but let's continue on the co-regulation.
Yeah, I know we could get off on a tangent because
yes, we can.
I'm multicultural, and I have Western European on one side and Middle Eastern on the other. So they are completely, American culture is a very, very independent, raising children in a very more independent rather than a collective culture. We could spend a whole hour talking about the differences, but I think it's important for families to find their own way and value what you value, not what other people tell you should be doing. I think it's so important for parents, because especially now, like you and I didn't have social media when we were parenting our little ones, right?
No.
Like as much. Think about all the pressure parents are getting on like Instagram feeds, all the ideas that they have coming at them 24/7 about what to do, how to do it right, how to do it wrong. But what about just focusing? And again, this is what I wanted, what I think adds to the literature with brain body parenting, is that you can also determine what's best for your child by looking at how well their body and brain is reacting to your parenting. And it's really cool to use your own child and yourself as the marker rather than an external standard or a parenting rule, which may be good for some children, but not your child. Does that make sense?
It completely does. Yes. I would love to go a little specific with examples of, let's say, a toddler, a preschool age kid, a middle childhood kid. How can we do co-regulation with them? Because co-regulation doesn't just end in childhood, right? We do this with our partners. It's a lifelong process. We're built like this, right?
Yeah.
We may not need as much as frequently as adults, but definitely it feels great when somebody is just there tuning to you and listening without giving you advice. But how can it look like for a toddler, for example? You write about toddlers so very well in your book.
Mm-hmm.
I love the chapter on toddlers.
Yes.
So how can we co-regulate with a toddler? What would it look like? Because the parents always want specific tips. So let's say I am the toddler, you are my mommy.
Yeah. Well, first of all, before I demonstrate what that might look like, for toddlers in general, I think if we can remember one thing is to slow things down, because toddlers don't transition as fast as adults or older children. And many of the problems that I've observed with our toddlers, so here's a practical tip, that is, try to have slower transitions. If you are playing with your toddler, which this is another thing I recommend, if you have 5 minutes a day to just follow their lead, to just let go, put your phone away, and don't suggest what to play. Just be there. A toddler will assign you a job within seconds. Just follow their lead. It's like fertilizer for the plant of toddlerhood, is to just be with them, follow their lead, let them be in charge for 5 minutes, and they'll play with you. And then the other thing is, it's these shorter, like the transitions between doing something I like and doing something I don't like. That's like going from playing with you to having to take a bath, or playing with you to putting on shoes and getting out and getting in the car seat, which is uncomfortable, those kinds of things. To just say, it's coming up, 5 more minutes, then we're going to get ready, or we're almost ready to go into the car. That is alerting the nervous system of a change. Because remember that this ability to regulate my mind shift around doing something that is pleasurable to doing something that I don't like so much is very, very young in development in toddlers. So I think we ask too much of them too soon. And just knowing about toddler development will help you. But this whole idea of witnessing too. So what does that look like in toddlerhood? If a toddler gets their, okay, say you got your grape, she wanted a grape and you cut it in half because you didn't want her to choke, right? So you cut the grape in half, hand her this grape, which you think is a grape. And then she's like, oh no, I wanted a whole grape, a grape and a half. And so all of a sudden you've got this like crying, upset toddler. What do? You witness and you narrate what's going on. Oh my goodness, you were expecting it to be a whole grape and mommy cut it in half. Oh my goodness, that was a surprise. If they can hear you. But what I did just there is I validated that they were reacting to something big. To toddlers, having your grape cut in half,
it's
when
a
you
disaster.
were expecting it whole, feels like a disaster. And we don't want to judge that. We judge that as, are you kidding? You're spoiled. I gave you a grape, just understand that's called, I talk about that in the toddler chapter, the prediction error. Once you understand what's going on in a developing toddler's brain, you can see that as legit, like, oh my goodness, we really need to validate, hold the line. No, you're not going to get a whole grape because mommy's cutting your grape because it's too big and you could choke on it. But here's the grape. You hold your limit, but you still acknowledge when they're in pain. That's okay.
Yeah, that's such great example. That's such great example. Thank you. Instead of losing your cool and going through a completely different route, focus on your child's experience, right? See what they're feeling and connect to that, vocalize that, and still hold the limit. How about with the preschooler who understands a little more and they can seem more independent and parents expect more, right? As kids get older, parents expect a lot more. So maybe you can say something about the expectation gap.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, there's the problem. See, when a preschooler is developing more language and they can talk in full sentences and ask you questions and answer questions, they can walk, they can talk. It's very deceiving because they seem like little and mini adults. And oftentimes they actually can like say something and you're going, oh my gosh, this is amazing. They're growing up. But what the expectation gap is that we need to understand that just because a child can work at the top of their box some of the time, that in preschoolers from 2 to 6, I would say, I would call that almost preschool, that their ability to do that is so uneven. So the expectation gap is when we're actually expecting too much, too soon from this particular child. And we have to understand that just because a child can do something some of the time, we have to factor in the body budget, their physiology, all these other things that go into their behaviors and emotions before we become judgmental. So with your preschoolers, again, try to figure out when it's a good time to reason with them, when they're well fed, when they're well rested, when they're able to focus and attend to what you're saying. But don't try to do it when they're crying, when they need a snack, when they're teething, when they're in pain. We really have to adjust our expectations and realize that it will get better. But preschoolers are still very, very unbaked little humans.
Can you say a little more about the body budget? I have in my notes, I meant to ask you earlier, but I think, again, this would be a good place to clarify what that is.
Yeah, so the body budget is Dr. Feldman Barrett's term for something called allostasis, which is basically the scientific term for maintaining stability in our bodies. So just as like a bank relegates finances, our body budget relegates things like oxygen, glucose, salt, water, all those things that actually run our physical bodies. And everything we do has an impact on our body budget, ours and our children's. So, for example, if a child is low on sleep, which impacts their body budget, which impacts how well they are going to be able to respond to life's demands. Then we need to make a deposit into that budget, which would be a nap or a good night's sleep. And we don't want to make a withdrawal, which would be asking them to learn something new on a day when they had a really bad night of sleep the night before. That would be another withdrawal. So learning something new is a big withdrawal from the body budget. So we can actually use it to know how to help our kids. Let me go to the other side, which is deposits. A deposit would be getting enough sleep, a hug, nutritious food, having someone witness you and co-regulate with you. All of those are deposits into a human body budget.
And how would you co-regulate with that preschooler if they are upset or they're, crying or tantruming? What would you do if you were to break it into step by step?
Well, the first step is checking on myself. So checking on my own pathway, my own body budget. Am I in the green? Am I okay? If I'm not, if I'm in the red, if I'm agitated myself, we want to go back to step one, which is take care of yourself, take a breath, get a glass of water, make sure the child's safe. But we have to remember that we are the tool. So step number one, make sure we are okay enough to do what we need to do as a parent. Number two is that we resonate. We look at what's going on. So if the child at that point, hopefully we can start to catch them before they fall apart. But if a preschooler is starting to have a hard time, I don't want to get into the car. I just can't get into the car. I don't want to go home. I want to stay here at the park. We can resonate. We can look at that child with compassion and say, oh, and I know you can't see me. You can't see me right now if you're listening to the podcast, but my face would be very empathic, like, oh, goodness, this is a problem. We need to go home right now, and you are not ready to go. This is such a problem, sweetheart. I see that that's difficult for you. Just name it. Just name that this is a difficult time. We don't have to not leave. We still have to leave, but sometimes, much of the time, when a human being feels witnessed, their body starts to relax.
Mine just relaxed when you said that. First, I was tensing up listening to the story. When you said that, and I'm also looking at you. I'm like, yes, mommy, I want to go home. It feels good. It's like you are guiding them instead of a power struggle. It's like you're getting them on the wavelength with you. Sort of,
Yes, I'm glad you felt that. It's a shift. I felt it too. Like my body kind of went down a little bit. I felt my seat a little bit more. So when we're doing that, you're right. We are guiding the nervous system towards safety, towards like, instead of the alternative, which would be, I told you, it's time to go. I gave you 3 chances. You're not going to get any
TV for the whole week.
No cocoa melon, no nothing,
How about the worst? Okay, bye. Then I'm leaving. You're staying here. And it's like the child is like so dysregulated. They're crying I know. And again, no blame, no shame for parents who, if you've said that, or if you do, I understand. Sometimes it feels like that's the only thing left to say. And it does work because of course the child doesn't want to be left alone, but it probably isn't the best thing because it works on threat rather than safety. Yeah. I know. I've done that too. Listen, we've all done that.
Sure.
There's no judgment. Just to conclude here, I know we have limited time today, but I would love to conclude by asking you the do's and don'ts of co-regulation. Are there such things if you were to summarize and give the listener a cheat sheet of sort?
Okay, that's good.
Or some takeaways.
I like these. I like to think on my feet, Anna, as we begin to end. So I'm thinking, okay, the do's and don'ts. Here's a don't. I usually don't like do's and don'ts, but because I think that anything you do in the moment has to be good enough, and you have to be gentle on yourself, because self-compassion is the flag I carry everywhere. That we have to be compassionate to ourselves as parents. But here's one thing I'd suggest. Don't try to be upbeat and okay for your kid if you're really feeling rotten inside.
Oh.
Because I know I've done that a lot when I was feeling so depleted, rather than calling my co-parent and saying, I need a break. I might try to fake it. And I just want to give us permission to understand that if you don't feel well enough, our children kind of can, I think, tell when we are saying one thing but feeling another. So don't try to be too stoic, is one thing for co-regulation. Allow yourself to be yourself. If you don't have it to give, that's okay. Try to be gentle on yourself, because your child will benefit when you do that. So so take care of yourself and don't try to overdo it and fake it. Although of course, sometimes we do have to put on a good face, but if you're doing that all the time, then that's not living in your body. And I want to encourage us to live in our bodies, to be aware of them, and to start to do things that I talk about in the self-care chapter that would include becoming aware of our sensations, maybe breathing or meditating or praying or whatever you do that helps you kind of slow down your body. And then as far as the do, I would say, don't worry about making your child dependent on you if you co-regulate with them. You might. So the reason I'm saying this is that I had a conversation last week with a preschool who had a foster parent there with the child, doing an amazing job of co-regulation, because the child was at a new school and they needed it. The child had a behavior issue only because of a history of trauma. And then the school said, you can't come anymore because we don't want the child to get dependent on you. So don't let our culture's skewed idea of independence mess with your own instincts as a parent. Yeah, honor your instincts and love your children, hold them close, have cozy times together, and your relationship with them is for a lifetime.
Oh, thank you so much. I love this, the do and the don't, even though I don't like this kind of, lists or things of this nature, but I really love your big message.
I think it was a good question.
It's a big message. Thank you so much. I am so in awe of your work and inspired, and I wish you best of luck and much more success. And I can't wait what's next coming from you. You look fantastic. You're a beautiful light, Mona. I really, truly love you. And on behalf of my community, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Anna. Right back at you. I'm so grateful to know you all these years, and we're on a journey together. So thank you again, and to your whole community for having me on, and we'll be in touch.
That concludes today's conversation, my dear listener, and I hope you enjoyed it. What's your biggest takeaway? Did you find it useful? Do you want to learn more about co-regulation? I highly recommend both of the books by Dr. Mona Delahooke. Also, be sure to check out my classes, The Why of Challenging Behaviors and the How To of Dealing with Them, and How to Be a Calm Parent. You can find them both on my website at authenticparenting.com/services. I love hearing from you. How are you enjoying the podcast? What are your recent favorite episodes and topics? I welcome your feedback, comments, and questions. You can send me a note to the email info@authenticparenting.com. You can call the number 732-763-2576 and leave a voicemail. And for the international listener, there is a free tool on the contact page of my website, authenticparenting.com/contact. If you enjoyed the podcast, you can help us out by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or rating it on Spotify if you happen to listen on Spotify, or by becoming a patron on patreon.com. With a small monthly contribution, you can support your favorite show and get supporter-only benefits, content, and exclusive access to me. Go to patreon.com/authentic parenting to learn more and choose a level of support. Join our 18 active patrons who together contribute $92 towards our monthly goal of $500. Become a patron today. Your support makes a difference. You can find the show and follow it wherever podcasts are played: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and elsewhere. And you can connect with me on Instagram, the only social media platform that I use. Until next week, connect to the present moment, to yourself and your children. I am Anna Seawold. Thank you so much for listening.